I think buyers are more educated than ever. And I think that's, it's critically important. And part of the job of marketing is to help them find that information when they need it.
Hello, humans. Great to have you listening today. Andrei, what's the best thing that's happened to you in the past 24 hours?
Past 24 hours, I would say I was able to get everything, finally settled into my new apartment in New York as of yesterday. So I'm feeling like I got a home now.
Well, there you go. I was hoping you were going to say recording this episode, but that's okay. My feelings aren't hurt. But this is a great episode. We have Chris Koehler, Chief Marketing Officer of Box. For those people that don't know Box, they were a pioneer in the document storage space. Now they've extended much beyond that. We're going to get into that in this episode, but really kind of changing the way that enterprises run their business. Chris is an amazing leader and truly a cross-functional leader. One of the things that I really admire about Chris is he has led many different parts of the business, everything from customer success to new business to now marketing, incredibly well-rounded. And really what we talk about a ton in this episode is just how can we bring a growth mindset and a lifelong learning mindset and infuse that into our organization and our people, and not just talk about it, but actually do it. Actually set up programs that allow our people to embody this and just be part of the fabric of their work. And so I think Chris does a really good job of sharing some tactical ways that he's done this. And we also talk a lot about the product-led growth stuff, which is Mr. Newman's current area of excitement.
Yeah, I mean, look, just to harp on your last point, there are a lot of people that'll say they're lifelong learners. This guy's really actually institutionalized it into his career path. The dude has touched every single functional group. And what's awesome about that is that now as the CMO of Box, he is thinking a lot about product-led growth. And, something that most people would agree on is PLG requires a perspective of many different departments, and it requires an understanding of a lot of different, functional groups, their roles, and rethinking them and making sure you're catering to an entirely new group of people, in this case being the end user. And so being able to pick Chris's brain on this has been amazing as I design a lot of the things that we're doing here at Troops. And so this episode was amazing.
Well, I hope you guys enjoy it. Take a listen on your walk, on your workout, on your commute, whatever it is. Let's hear from Chris.
Hey, Chris, what's going on?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you, man. You guys are pretty much like the story of grind it out, SaaS, SaaS is hard, but you can do it. And look at what amazing things happen. And so for years, I have been watching just the work that you guys have been doing. I've been a user of the product. I'm just frankly excited to learn more about what it's like being a leader at that company. And so I think today, number of topics that were interesting to talk about, at a company like Box, right? You guys everybody knows you. You've been around for a while. You're a leader in the space. How do you indoctrinate that constant evolving, constant growth inside of an organization at the scale that you guys are operating at? Because, at our size of company and a lot of startups, it's like every 6 months it's a brand new company. And maybe that's the case at Box too. I don't know, but it seems like it's been a focus for you guys, and I'm interested to learn more.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, the overnight success of 15, 16-year-old SaaS company, right? And I think it's a delicate balance where you have to continue to reinvent yourself. I mean, obviously, tech is changing so quickly, and things like the pandemic, blow everything up, and we've got to reimagine, how do we go to market in general. But I think it's a healthy balance of setting out a course and a strategy and thinking across that horizon. When you're a startup, you're right. Every 6 months, like there's something new, there's new information you've got to adjust and tinker the strategy to work through that. But as you get larger, and it becomes much more harder to be that nimble that you can completely pivot, in a given quarter. And so I think what you've got to do is you've got to set a sort of foundation of, one example in marketing. When I started as CMO, it was, we're going to set our 3-year strategy. Here are the goals that we strive to be as an organization and how we're going to help Box grow. But on a quarterly basis, all the activities that we do and the strategies to help us continue to meet that vision have to be adjusted. And part of the challenge is if you are shifting your strategy pretty significantly every quarter, every 6 months, it's really hard to drive that continuity with the team. And then it becomes like the shiny object, which we all know is like, oh, we're going to do this. No, now we're going to do this. And that just becomes very, very difficult to get momentum and get the teams aligned around where you're headed as an organization. So we do a pretty good job of setting sort of our course and making adjustments and tweaks along the way. But, I'm 2 years into the CMO role and our 3-year strategy hasn't changed. Some of the tactics of how we get there have changed, but ultimately that's our sort of North Star as we think through it.
Having led marketing at Troops, for part of the journey, I totally get it, right? These things take time to even just properly run an experiment and have the amount of learning required to really make the right decisions. What you're talking about takes a tremendous amount of discipline.
Totally agree. And I think what was interesting prior to Box, I'd spent 10 years at Adobe and was part of that crazy transformation of going to becoming one of the sort of pioneers in converting a company to SaaS. And one of the things I learned very, very quickly from the leadership there at Adobe was discipline and focus. Because there's always a million things that you can go after, but you have to be disciplined in the things that matter and ignore the things that don't. And that is really, really hard to do in practice. But if you don't, you're never going to move the business forward. So yeah, discipline is 100% critically important.
So, I feel like the last year is a very telling example of when, you're playing a certain game and then the game can change. Right? Like COVID changed everything. And so I know we had a plan and a playbook, and frankly, external circumstances just completely made us throw it out the window. And so like an example of like how you stay the course despite something completely game changing happening outside of your company, because I have found that personally very hard to do.
Yeah, it comes down to a couple factors. One, do you have the sort of agility within your organization to make those and adjust very, very quickly? And one of the things that we talk a lot about is we have to be a much more, and I don't want to use agile as like the hardcore methodology, but we know we have to be more nimble in responding to things. So we were putting that motion into place. And so as we think about, I guess it was 14 months ago in March, where we did a ton of physical events. We had a large field marketing organization, and we had reps going on site, meeting with customers, and that all changed overnight. And it was like, well, what are we going to go do? But I think the team rallied around it. And I remember over the weekend, we had an entire plan of how we were going to go execute in the quarter. And over the weekend, we all rallied around. And we said, okay, well, this is going to work. We're going digital first only. How would we go execute that? Do we have the team? Do we have the right tools to help us go do that? And it was amazing to see sort of the perseverance of the team to really take this on as a challenge, trust each other and just say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go execute this and, hope for the best from that. But we didn't know if it was going to work. I mean, no one did, but it worked out. It worked out pretty well for us.
So, Chris, the episode that we published yesterday, we were talking with the CEO of Frame that I always name is Emery Wells. And something that he was talking about a lot is establishing a culture of excellence. And he said that one of the biggest things in doing that is first of all, giving examples of what excellence looks like, but second of all, also just creating a shared commitment around the fact that this needs to happen so that when these things occur, when problems spot themselves, there is no negotiation. It just happens. And at the crux of that as well was just this idea that he has realized in the process that centralization at scale is possible if you build the right systems. And so in thinking about that kind of stuff, and in running a marketing organization for a company like Box, how do you balance centralization with the guardrails for allowing for creativity, et cetera? I'd love to hear more about that.
I think again, it goes back to, there's a couple factors that are critically important. One, do you set a standard and expectation around execution for the team? And do you have the trust to allow them to have the autonomy to go execute based on the way that they think they're going to get to the numbers? So we spend time on our OKRs and we set out on a quarterly basis and we say, here are the things we're going to deliver both as an organization and back to the business. But my leadership style is very much giving them the autonomy to go execute in the way that they think they're going to get to the number. Because I don't think you can scale. And as a global marketing organization, we have a foundation and a framework of what we'd like to go execute on. But we give autonomy to the regions to go and the tactics are going to be very different around that. So it is a delicate balance. But again, we set the expectation. This is what we're going to go deliver. Now it's up to you to go figure out the plan to get us there.
One of the things that we were talking about was just kind of like personal development of your people inside a Box. Like, it sounds like you guys have a strategy in place for growing the business, but is the same level of kind of thoughtfulness around just the personal development side of things? Because the reason I ask is like, it's funny, like people are clearly like what moves the needle in a business, but in terms of like how thoughtful we are in investing them, a lot of times it, perhaps isn't as well thought out as the actual like marketing tactics or whatever you're going to do to hit your number.
Yeah, totally. And it is a big philosophy, both for Box as a company, but also as the marketing organization. And so as a company, we have this notion of LearnFest where we're continuing to invest in people. They get a chance, whether they're managers or individual contributors. And so we invest from a people perspective in this program. But one of the sets of feedback we got as we pulsed and surveyed the marketing organization is they said, hey, this is great, I'm learning, but I want to know more I want to know how to grow. I want to know different disciplines of marketing. I want to understand what people's career journeys were. And so we had this idea, which we're right in the middle of right now, called a Marketing LearnFest. And the idea here was, okay, how do we invest in our team so that they can learn from their peers or learn from folks from the outside? And so I do an interview series with different CMOs, SaaS CMOs, and it's an opportunity for the team to ask them questions, get an external perspective. It doesn't always come from me as the CMO, but they hear from leaders in their industry, and we're all learning a ton. I mean, it's fascinating where I'm taking notes and I'm like, wow, that's a really cool program that you guys are doing. So that's one level. They hear from other thought leaders and other CMOs in the industry. We're also doing I would describe as a masterclass where we're getting subject matter experts to talk about their craft and how they think about it and best practices. And the attendance from the marketing team has been fantastic because they can sit there and then they can interact and ask questions. Okay, from a social media perspective, how do you manage this? How do you think about the tone and the voice and current events? And so they're doing a Q&A with the subject matter expert. So again, they're learning, and so that they become better marketers and I think have better appreciation of the craft. And then we're doing some fun career chats because everyone has a different career path and journey. I mean, obviously mine is very different. And so they're getting a chance to learn from other leaders in the organization of when they made big, bold moves and what their thought process and how they think about growth and career change. So it's a pretty heavy investment from a time perspective, but we think it pays off because the team is just learning, and I think ultimately we'll be better for it.
Yeah, not only better, but I also imagine, I mean, people leave companies when they don't feel like they're growing. And so, and retention is someone running a business, like that's that can make or break the velocity at which you get things done, right? It's really hard to find good people, then you have to ramp them. And so, that to me, like any investment in the growth of the people and them feeling that is an incredible investment as a leader. Speaking of bold moves, I mean, you have been all over the map in terms of go-to-market functions and roles. Like, how did you go from the head of customer success at Box to the CMO? That's something you don't see every day.
Yeah, I have a little bit of an unconventional path, but somewhat deliberate. I think for me, I believe in the world of generalists because I think it gives you a broader appreciation in business if you've been in the shoes of individuals in different functions. So I've been fortunate enough over my career to be in product, to be in sales organizations, to lead sales teams, to run customer success, and now marketing. And it's a funny story. I had spent 10 years at Adobe, and I had a fantastic run. It was an amazing company. I had a great trajectory, but I was ready to challenge myself and take the next, what was that next big, bold move I was going to do. And you talk about people business. I got a chance to meet Aaron Levy and Steph Carrillo, Aaron, our CEO founder, and Steph, our COO. And I just made an instant connection with both of them. And they had said to me, hey, why don't you come over and transform customer success? I had done this at Adobe in prior roles. In the last role, I was running the go-to-market for the Creative Cloud Enterprise business, which was Photoshop, InDesign, all those tools that are pretty ubiquitous around the globe. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not sure this is the next step for me. But I sort of took this leap and said, okay, well, I'll do this for just over a year. But I want growth. I want a bigger role at Box. I don't know what that is, but I'll do this and then we'll figure it out. And so, just over a year into the role, our prior CMO had left the organization, and we were interviewing people for the role. And I was part of that panel. And after going through quite a few different candidates, and we couldn't figure out how to calibrate on it, it just sort of struck me. I was like, hey, I think I want to do this. and at first was like, oh, really? Are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. And I had spent, it's interesting because Adobe, our target persona was very much around the marketer, whether you're on the creative side of the house or, I came up through digital marketing, which is now the experience business. So while I was not a traditional marketer, I was working with marketers and CMOs around best practices for 10 plus years, talking about, hey, you need to be data driven and the art and science of marketing, all that. So it was what I lived for. And I convinced Steph and Aaron that, hey, I was the right fit for this. And they gave me the opportunity to come over and lead. So it was very unconventional. And probably the number one question I get is like, how the heck do you go from that to that? But there's definitely some nuance to the story for sure.
That's amazing. And I think, one of the things that's so important as a leader is empathy, right? And ultimately, like the marketing team's job is to support other parts of the go-to-market, right? To make sure that salespeople can have effective conversations, properly position the product, to make sure customer success is telling the amazing stories that you guys are doing to drive adoption across the user base. And so, being in that seat, I think is in some ways a superpower, having been there before. Like, what it's like to be on the front lines.
Yeah, 100%. And I talk to my team about this all the time, where if you've never been in a sales organization, you don't understand the pressure, right, on a quarterly basis that the sales team deals with. And when you have been on that side of the house and you can have that empathy as a marketing leader. When there's pressure from the sales team, it's like, hey, I understand what you're going through. You are on a clock, and we have to go help you be successful. And the same thing, one of the big pivots we made from a marketing organization when I moved over was we weren't spending a lot of time thinking about customer marketing. And yet a huge percentage of our net new revenue came from existing customers. And so one of the things I was like, well, why aren't we partnering with the CS organization in a much better way to go drive onboarding experiences and adoption of the products? Because if we want to cross-sell into our existing base, we better get those existing customers healthy and happy. And so we can go sell them and retain them. So that was one of the real big pivots that I made. And I think if I had never really been in the CS org and been responsible for driving that adoption and retention, I probably wouldn't have had that perspective as a marketer for sure.
No question. And by the way, the more people I talk to in a marketing leadership function, the more and more I keep hearing customer marketing. It is the voice of the customer today, in my opinion, is as relevant as it's ever been. And it makes perfect sense. It's like when you go on Amazon and you search for something, what do? You look at the ones that have the best reviews, and that's where you start. And then sometimes if you're really curious, you then go read those reviews. And that homework exercise, that's how a lot of people are making software buying decisions these days.
Yeah, I think buyers are more educated than ever. And I think that's, it's critically important. And part of the job of marketing is to help them find that information when they need it. And it's not just about sort of top of the funnel anymore. I actually own our community site as well. And how do I think about that? Because people are going to go there and understand what are the challenges, what are people looking for, what are the things I'm not hearing from maybe our sales team that I've got to think through. So they're more educated than ever. They're going and using all the digital channels to go research that. In some cases, they know as much about the product as someone walking in, whether it's via Zoom or in the door. And so we've got to make sure that they get the right information at the right time to help them make those buying decisions.
What is one marketing, I guess, like area that you think companies aren't investing enough in? What's kind of a marketing hot take that you are excited about?
I think there's going to be an interesting convergence of this. We call it product-led growth, but just e-commerce. Because I think over time, more and more B2B buyers want the ability to just purchase online. And I think obviously there's complexity associated with that and all that, but you're seeing more and more, like we've had a tremendous amount of success over the last year in our e-commerce channel. And so I think you're going to see whether I want to go in product and I want to upgrade products or whatever that is, or I just want to go in and I want to purchase your solution in a digital fashion. I think that's going to be more of the future. And you're going to have sales teams that help support that in the large transactions. But I think you're going to see more self-service in B2B than we have today. And you're seeing a lot of startups obviously start there, but you're going to see more large enterprise companies trying to figure out how do they offer this as capabilities.
I totally agree, Chris. And I was actually reading an article the other day that was talking about how the old, like a lot of people would say, yeah, you could start out as PLG, let's say, and then you can scale up, like you can make the shift to go up market and start hiring salespeople and run an enterprise motion, but you can't really do the reverse. And it's really difficult for companies to do the reverse. Something that I'm working on right now at Troops is actually the new free trial that we are working on. And so my question to you is, it's clear that with that change and shift in our industry, that a lot of roles in the go-to-market are going to converge. And you were already kind of like touching on that. And you've been in all those roles. So what skill sets are going to be the most important? Like what's the right mix?
Yeah, I mean, it is, and you're seeing it there's no right or wrong go-to-market model around how you set up, the age-old question, who owns renewals? Is it sales team? Is it a separate renewals team? Is it customer success? All of those. But I think what customers are going to be looking for more and more is a strategic partner that's helping them get value out of what they've purchased and guiding them along that journey. And I think the hard part is when it's distributed across multiple people in the organization, it's hard to build that trust. So I think what'll end up happening, it'll be less about the transaction and more a consultative, really listening, understanding the use cases associated with that, and then making sure that they are getting the value out of what they've purchased. The hard part, one of the things that we talk about, and our CRO talks a lot about as well, is there are so many, every organization has so many SaaS applications, hundreds of SaaS applications. And how do you justify the value of those? And the companies that can sit down, partner, and make sure that the business understands where they play and how they're helping them grow are, I think, the ones that are going to succeed long term for sure.
That makes sense for enterprise companies for sure. Like, I just think about at Troops, like we run MedPick and we get the metrics in the sales process and then we sell against them. And then that's the business case. And I guess for me, and maybe it's, more important at the enterprise level, but like doing that, how do you do that at scale? Is that like an in-product self-serve analytics that the value that make it easy to draw that conclusion that, are built into the product? Is it, I would just be that to me is like the hardest nut to crack.
Yeah, totally. And again, we have a very long tail of customers, 100,000 plus, and we serve, the largest enterprise all the way down to, 3-person architecture firm, as I like to describe. And yes, you have to build experiences at scale. And one of the things that we have done over this past year is partnered super closely with a product onboarding and adoption team. So we actually have product managers thinking about how do we create those experiences along that journey, and how do we make sure that when they sign up, that the onboarding experience, they understand what to do. There's clarity of that. And we need to get them from an active usage perspective as soon as they sign up. We have a lot of metrics that show if people don't get actively using it over the first 2 to 8 weeks, then they never, it doesn't become a habit. And so in order to do this at scale, you need to do both an in-product experience, but you have to couple that with the marketing organization. And this is where customer marketing comes into play, where you can't get them to use the product and create those experiences if they're not in the product. And so how do we as a marketing team get them back into so that we can facilitate that journey? And so we've spent a tremendous amount of effort over the last year of building up these organizations. We've got, like I said, we've got product managers, we have engineering resources associated with this. And they're thinking about how do we drive adoption and seat usage, we're a seat-based model, seat usage for the company. And but it is very cross-functional. Everyone from product to sales to CS to marketing is part of this digital team that we meet continuously.
Yeah, Chris, you're really striking a chord here. I really, I don't want to put you on the spot, but in terms of thinking about that onboarding experience, what are the 3 or 4 core actions that you're driving towards, and how are you doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's specific for every business, but for us, it's have they set up a folder structure? Have they started to put content in Box? Have they started to invite other people to collaborate on that content with them? And we do a lot of product analytics, and we've got an amazing data science and business analytics team that helps us look at every action that happens in the product, what actually drives long-term retention of those customers. And so we've done that analysis, and we have this notion of an onboarding guide that is almost gamifying that to get them to do those actions. Because if we know that they start doing those in the first 2 weeks, you'll actually see a pretty significant uptick of retention long term for them. So,
absolutely. And here's my last free trial related question for you, Chris. So your trial is 14 days, correct?
yes.
Why is it 14 days?
Because we found that, again, within if they haven't done what they need to do after 14 days, then they're not going to come back. You could extend it to 30 days, but we haven't seen a material difference in that. And so obviously we would like to convert them as fast as possible into hopefully paying customers. And we've just looked at sort of the inflection points around this and said, okay, this is the time. After that, if they're not going to convert, they're not going to convert. So
that makes total sense. All right, Chris, we're going to move into the lightning round. This is where we ask a couple of personal questions, let the audience get to know you a little better. So here's my first one. Who's a leader that you really admire in tech? Who do you look up to?
Yeah, that one's a tricky one because it's hard to, I find it hard to admire leaders if you don't really know them, right? Because so many of these tech leaders they have public personas and you don't really know what it's to be part of their, you know what I mean? It's like, oh my God, this person's amazing. And you're like, well, yeah, but you don't know what it makes, how is it to work for her or him? Those sort of things. But I have had the pleasure for the last 13 years of working with two very different but amazing leaders, Shantanu Narayan at Adobe. The way that he helped pivot and transform that company into one of the most valuable software companies now is incredible. And I was very lucky to be part and see sort of the inner workings of, his approach and how he ran all that. So that was, I just have such respect for Shantanu in what he did there. And then Aaron, very different leader, but to have a CEO founder and see the passion and this is literally his life's work, and he has built such an amazing culture that it starts from him and permeates down. And so I've learned so much around just how do you build a culture from a CEO founder that I'm lucky to have learned from both of them.
Chris, I'm going to hop in here and steal the mic for a second in Andrei's lightning round. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the reason I'm interested in asking the forward looking is, you clearly want to push yourself and constantly evolve. And so what's a mountain that you haven't climbed yet that you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. We talk as a leadership team and we're fairly open about, growth potential. At some point, I want to run a company. And I've been super clear. And if you look at my, career progression where I've been in many different roles, that's fairly deliberate so that at some point, if I'm lucky enough to run a company, or a large division of of an organization, that I'm setting myself up to have at least some understanding associated with that. So probably, I'm in no hurry to leave Box, but, at some point I'd love to run my own company.
In tandem with that, just a follow-on question here. What is something that you don't understand right now or a skill that you don't have right now that you'd like to, acquire either a better understanding of or just, harden that skill?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I would play it in two ways. From a functional perspective, I don't know as much about finance, and it's one of the things that I'm actually trying to actively get more involved in for sure. But I'm always fascinated by human behavior. My wife's actually a psychologist, and I use her as a sounding board around human behavior. And we're constantly talking about this and helping me grow as a leader as I think through the organization and the people that I'm lucky enough to lead.
And the last one here, Chris, is what would you say was the inflection point in your career?
I think it was, and I mentioned it before, I think taking the leap to come to Box from Adobe after having such an amazing opportunity there to grow over 10 years. But I took that leap of faith and joined a smaller company that were getting back into reacceleration of growth. And it's paid off. So that's probably the biggest inflection point for sure.
I love it. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times the biggest opportunities are when there's, more uncertainty. Fortune, one of my favorite quotes is fortune favors the bold.
Well, and I think that the interesting part is I've been more comfortable being uncomfortable. And that is just something that I think I try to impress upon the team, that if you're comfortable, then you're not growing and learning. And the more that you can get uncomfortable, I think it's better for your long-term outlook.
100%. Well, Chris, this has been amazing, man. This has been so inspiring hearing about your journey and a lot of amazing stuff that you're doing at Box. And I'm excited to be watching you guys on the sidelines. And I know that your company is just going to continue to do great work.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me.
All righty. Well, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. And if you liked what you heard today, don't forget to leave a review. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you.